Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a joyful, relaxing, and restorative holiday season. And I hope you feel ready for 2026. And if your holiday fit none of those descriptors, I am sending you love. And if you had a wonderful holiday, but you also kind of feel like you went through the spin cycle of a washing machine, I feel you. So New Year's always comes with resolutions. Whether or not we embrace that or avoid it, they're here. We're thinking about them. And often the biggest one that pops up surrounds eating and how we might want to approach it differently in the new year. And this is a food podcast, so we're going to talk about it. And personally, I always enter January feeling a little bit worse for the wear. My diet kind of devolves into this Christmas cookie, cheese, sparkling wine mishmash, especially in that week between Christmas and New Year's. And if you're also feeling a little bit worse for the wear and you're feeling a pull towards maybe a little bit of a reset, but you have no interest in fad dieting or restrictive eating or any of that nonsense, then this episode with registered dietitian Skylar Griggs is for you.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Not From Concentrate newsletter on Substack. Subscribe for free to stay up to date on new episodes and get access to giveaways and bonus content. I also want to give a special shout out to my paid subscribers who get new, wildly delicious and distraction-proof recipes delivered to their inboxes every month, as well as essays and tips for cooking with a busy brain. Plus, paid subscribers get access to my full recipe archive. Head to catherinesmart.com to become a free or paid subscriber, and thank you for supporting the show. Skylar Griggs is here with us today. She is a friend and the founder of Newbury Street Nutrition. So Skylar and I met through private chef clients many years ago, and she really helped me reframe my thinking around nutrition and how real science-backed knowledge can be a powerful tool, one that doesn't buy into diet culture or steal joy from food, but quite the opposite. The truth is, I still find myself wanting to not think about nutrition a lot of the time, or, convincing myself that I'll just learn things I don't want to know. And that's something I'm not proud to admit. But when I do prioritize eating food that tastes good and makes me feel good, I never regret it. And I bet some of you feel the same. In a world full of food noise and dubious nutrition advice on social media, Skylar is such a breath of fresh air, you guys. As I mentioned, she is a licensed registered dietitian, and we will clarify what that means in our conversation. I can tell you it's much different than just deciding you're going to be a food influencer. And she's also a nutrition counselor, and she specializes in a variety of nutrition-related conditions. So Skylar has experience working in pediatric and family nutrition, as well as pre- and postnatal nutrition, eating disorders, weight management, cardiac risk factors, including hypertension. She works with folks who are managing high cholesterol and obesity and diabetes, as well as peri and postmenopause. She really has a holistic, super practical view and experience. And in addition to her private practice, she is a senior dietitian with the Preventative Cardiology Division at Boston Children's Hospital, which is a teaching hospital of Harvard Medical School. So what I'm saying is she's very legit. And she's also very fun and very smart. And I'm so glad we get to chat with her today. So let's get into it with Skylar. Skylar Griggs, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I want to actually just start at the beginning with you. You are, a registered dietitian. You worked at Boston Children's. You have your own private practice. But personally, you were like the first legit nutrition guru with the credentials that I ever really interacted with.
Aww.
For anybody listening, we met through a beloved mutual friend and client, and you have always been such a trusted source for me for nutrition and also business. You've just been such a great pal and someone I trust with both of those things. And so, it being the new year, I just thought, well, everybody has, self-improvement and possibly dietary changes on their mind. I wanted to talk to someone who is the real deal, and that's you.
Oh, well, thank you. And ditto, I feel like I've learned so much from you. I mean, I can remember our first meeting when we met at that cafe. I think it was in Cambridge. And we were
Tate, it was
just
so
kind of,
cold.
yes. And we were just starting to we were kind of starting our own businesses together and kind of navigating that landscape as young women in the industry. And I look back on that very fondly.
Me too.
Yeah, it's been great. I feel like I've learned as much from you.
Well, I want to set this up for everybody because I think that there is so much food noise and so many influencers. And even if you're only taking the smartest, best folks that are talking about diet and nutrition, each person obviously has their own sort of set of baggage they're bringing to it. So I would love to just sort of set the table by hearing a little bit from you about, how do you come to this practice? What do you do for your clients and your patients? And how did you get here and how are you showing up to talk about nutrition today?
Yeah, it's funny when you say the word food influencer, I kind of cringe because I'm like, oh, I don't want to be an influencer. So much of my background and training, and not that there's anything wrong with being an influencer, but I think so much of my background and training is in science. And so I actually started in eating disorders. My background was in eating disorders. I was working in New Jersey and New York. It was my first job. And I got an offer to come over to Children's and work in their cardiology department. I was about 28 years old. I'm going to be 40 next month. So it was quite a little while ago. And it was an incredible opportunity. And I spent about 12 years there full time, just really focused on kind of learning the ins and outs of nutrition and diet and ways to reduce, heart disease, healthy ways to cook and to make changes that didn't feel overwhelming to a lot of people. And so I spent about 12 years there full time while simultaneously growing my private practice on nights and weekends. And I took the jump right after my daughter was born to go essentially full time into private practice. I am still at the hospital one day a week because I just can't get away. I just adore the people that work there and the patients. But I started my practice in 2013, like I said, on the nights and weekends. And then once I had my daughter in 2021, I actually started hiring other dietitians to work with me, and it's been great. So our practice is really focused on weight management and reducing kind of people's risk for heart disease, like cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, things like that. But we also see pediatric patients. We see picky eaters. We see people who are struggling just to get enough in during the day, some GI type stuff. So it's been great expanding the team because now we can see a lot of different types of stuff.
That's great. And you know what? I knew your background, but looking back on it, it makes sense. I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to your approach is because of your background of working with folks with eating disorders, but then also helping folks who might just be looking to lose weight in a healthy way because it's negatively impacting either their mental or physical health. You have this really balanced approach that I appreciate because there's a lot of scary, triggering stuff out there for folks who may be struggling with eating disorders. And then it also feels like sometimes we're scared to even talk about the realities of hey, maybe we're eating too much sugar. Maybe we're not having good nutrition. Maybe we would like to lose a little bit of weight. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you're just such a steady person. How do you strike that balance when you're talking to kind of the average person and maybe you're not in a one-on-one where you can tailor the message? How do you balance that diet culture-y stuff that can be kind of scary and then the fact that a lot of folks are looking to manage their weight in a healthy way?
That's a great question. I mean, I think when we think about kind of the landscape right now when it comes to nutrition, so much of what people get inundated with, and also the way that the algorithm works, is if they look something up about nutrition, they just get flooded with all the different diets, supplements, tests that you should do. And so extremism really wins, right? The things that are extreme on Instagram related to anything, but also specifically food and diet, they are always going to have kind of the biggest following and the most amount of interactions. But the reality is that nutrition doesn't need to be that extreme. The way that you eat doesn't need to be that extreme. If you eat healthy 80% of the time, then 20% of the time you have to live. And I think that that's the way that I come at it with my clients, because that's the only way that it's going to be sustainable, is that if you really put the focus in to eat healthy 80% of the time and give yourself that 20%. I also think that it's important to know that the nutrition information that you want to get, you want to be from a registered dietitian, someone who's had extensive training in nutrition, knows the science behind it, especially working with different types of patients. I know many of your listeners are in the ADHD community. And so understanding that in and of itself, and then the ways that nutrition can kind of help or hurt that comes with a lot of science and education. And so I think don't look for the quick fixes or the extreme nutrition recommendations on Instagram. Try to go for the more sustainable ones, because that's what we're looking for, is something that you can do for years and years.
I will never forget when you brought up the 80-20 rule, because I was cooking for clients and you were helping, me adjust their diets to meet their goals. And as somebody who really approaches food from a pleasure perspective, I've been, or at least I was, very sort of anxious and not almost wanting to tap into the realities of it, because I think I was fearful of, well, what if I find out something I don't want to know? So that was a lot. That was in my 20s. And that was really more from a weight perspective. Now, as a 40-year-old woman with ADHD, I'm going through a similar reckoning of realizing, okay, I know that there are things I could be doing grounded in science that can fit in my lifestyle, that will improve my cognitive health, my mental health, and of course, physical health. And I'm curious about it. And I also find myself almost like, I don't want to know, because I don't want to change. So my question for you is sort of twofold. One, how do you advise a patient who might be feeling like scared to confront the realities?
Yep.
How would you speak to me if I was your patient and I'm sort of confessing to you, hey, I know there's stuff out there that can help me, but I'm scared to change. I'm scared to learn. I
think it's so relatable. I mean, I think that there's nothing more relatable than someone saying that to me. And I think, one of the reasons that I feel like I gel well with my patients is I'm a huge foodie. Like, I love food. I love trying different restaurants. My husband and I try to sneak away to different, hole in the walls and places when we get a date night. And I just love all different types of foods. Like, I'm never going to tell people to shy away from an opportunity to try different types of foods and experiment with things. It would be a huge bummer if we put the expectation on ourselves to eat healthy 100% of the time. And so when you come on as a client working with our practice, it's like, I want you to understand that, like, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Like, I want you to get to the good, and the changes that you're going to see in the good are much more sustainable than trying to eat perfectly all the time. And there's a lot that you can do in terms of diet when it comes to ADHD that can be supportive. But you also have to say, you know what? Okay, it's Halloween. Okay, I'm going to go to a birthday party. You're not going to eat the cake. You're not going to have, right, a piece of candy, because what kind of living is that? And so I think that's what I really try to push on my clients. And I try to empower them to, I'm recommending this because of this, so that by the time they leave me, they can make all these decisions on their own and kind of have that information in their back pocket.
Sure. Okay. And understanding that eating quote unquote healthy is going to look a little bit different for everybody. Can we dig into a little bit of the kind of basics there of, like, when you say, so say I don't have any dietary restrictions, I don't have disordered eating, I'm just looking to improve my diet to help with my ADHD and be high functioning. Can you give me some tips and things that, like, some of the first things that come to mind for you that I might want to look into?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the first thing that comes to mind for all my patients, but especially those with ADHD, is fiber. So one of the biggest things that we talk about and push in our practice is making sure that our patients are getting enough fiber. So I generally recommend that most adults get somewhere between 30 to 40 grams of fiber. And for those who don't know, fiber is kind of the plant portion of the carbohydrate that makes you feel full, but other benefits include that it lowers your cholesterol, it lowers your blood pressure. And more importantly, for those with ADHD, it actually balances your blood sugar. And having low blood sugar or high blood sugar, especially with something like ADHD, can just kind of accelerate or improve the problem, right? So when we find ways to balance blood sugar by increasing fiber in your diet, it will really help in terms of energy levels and focus and things like that. Fiber occurs naturally in fruits and vegetables, but for a lot of our patients, we recommend specific high fiber grains and products that they can use that will kind of help them feel full, so they don't feel as tempted to go for the unhealthy items. The other piece of that is just making sure that every time you have something with fiber, that you're combining it with protein, right? So if you think if you're having some kind of high fiber tortilla or bread or some kind of high fiber salad, that you're getting some type of protein on there, because we know that protein is really, really, really good for the brain, and especially proteins that are high in omega-3s. So things like fish and walnuts and cod. And so those things, those two things jump out at me right away.
I think anybody out there with a busy brain feels that and knows like how sensitive we can be to those swings. I want to go back a little bit because, this is a food podcast. One of my favorite things to do is take more like a medical recommendation, like high fiber, or we just throw out salmon, and then get into like, what does that look like practically? Because sometimes I think the overwhelm of like, okay, so I have to go buy all these high fiber things can be off-putting. So can we just like riff a little bit on some of these high fiber, protein inclusive dishes or meals that could fit into the diet?
With some of my like more foodie type clients, it's really interesting because a lot of them will try to find ways to work it in at breakfast and lunch so that at dinner they can just really enjoy the foods that they want to do. But I found a couple hacks recently. So one thing that you can do is if you're someone who just enjoys like having a salad or some kind of vegetable and, pasta type dish at lunch, I recently discovered basil seeds. Have you used these?
No.
Basil seeds. So literally the seed of a basil plant. They have about 15 grams of fiber per serving they're amazing. And they're truly just basil seeds. They're also a really rich source of, we talked about omega-3s, potassium, magnesium, things that our brains need. So what I will do with some of my patients is if they like love kind of these mixed bowls or dishes or things like that at lunch, I'll be like, throw some basil seeds on top of it. If it's a salad, it'll taste crunchy. If it's a warmer dish, you can kind of just mix it in. And that's a really easy way to kind of work a little more fiber in the morning. There's different granolas and seeds, like, pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds and nut butters that are also nice sources of fiber too. So it doesn't have to be like stocking up on all these different products to hit your fiber needs. Sometimes it's just adding in one thing here and there that you pick up, as part of a recipe generally anyway.
That's so smart. And also I had written on here lunch because being one of your foodie friends, that's 100% how I think about it. When I am doing what I know makes me feel the best and make my brain work the best, which is not always, it is, okay, breakfast and lunch, I'm going to try to have like nutrition first, because for me, dinner is about unplugging and pleasure. And
totally.
Also, I don't need the benefits as much. I find to really function at my highest level through the day, like I know that I need to be eating protein. I know that I need to be eating fiber. And if I sort of check those things off the list earlier in the day, it frees it up in the evening. I had a personal question for you that I was hoping you could maybe like explain the science behind, because I know I can't be the only one that deals with this.
Yeah.
So I find that if I eat sweets, and it sometimes isn't even like quote unquote bad sweets. Like if I just start my day with something sweet, I crave sugar all day long.
Yes.
It reminds me of how they say, like if you scroll your phone in the morning, you crave those cheap dopamine hits all day long.
Don't we all do that?
Can you explain the science behind a little bit? Like, why is that? Why is it that I like crave it all day if I have it
That
first?
is one of the most common questions I ask. And I always bring people back to this scan that I saw when I was in grad school. And I apologize, I don't have the actual, if you Google it, you will see it. I don't have the actual reference, but there was a study done where they looked at the brains of rats. And again, you can't always translate rat science into human science, right? But it just gives you a sense. And they gave the rats in this study a serving of sugar and a serving of cocaine. And the portions of their brains that lit up more did so in the sugar group. So that should show you that like, it's not in your head. It's not something you're imagining. Like they lit up like a Christmas tree when they gave those rats sugar, the same way that they did, when they gave them something that we know is harmful. So I think sugar's a tricky one, because the more of it you have, you may often find for anyone, the more that you want. But we also don't want to be so restrictive, in avoiding it that by the times we do have it, we can't stop. So just to validate that is a real thing that you are feeling, backed by science. And the second thing is that when you think about why are you craving sugar for the rest of the day, it does kind of go back to blood sugar, right? So blood sugar regulates your mood, it regulates your appetite, it regulates your energy levels. People often think of it in the setting of diabetes, but we all have blood sugar levels that fluctuate throughout the course of the day, and that's normal. But when you introduce some type of candy, sugar sweetened beverage, like, soda, juice, things like that, or even just a small piece of chocolate, it makes your blood sugar come up and crash down very quickly versus, combining it with something that has a little bit more fat, something that has a little bit more protein. So the reason that you kind of feel that craving for the rest of the day is because you kind of entered into what we call like a blood sugar roller coaster where you're hitting these highs and lows. The good thing is that it's much better to enjoy that sweet or that serving of sugar after you've had something that has fiber or protein in it because you won't have as much of a spike. And so I don't know if you follow, there's a really interesting scientist on Instagram, the glucose goddess. I don't know if you've seen any of her stuff.
No, but I will now.
It's interesting. I mean, it's the same theory over and over again, but it's basically like if you're going to have sugar or anything that's going to raise your glucose is blood sugar. If you're going to have a slice of chocolate cake, have it after you've eaten like a huge, beautiful salad with protein and healthy fats and things like that on it, because your body will respond differently. And so that's what I like to empower people to know is like much better to have it after you feel satisfied than have it be the first thing that you eat when you feel hungry.
I had gestational diabetes, and you actually were one of the people I called crying, and you helped me.
Oh my gosh.
It was as like awful as it was a really educational experience for me because I had to take my blood after all my meals. And I learned a couple of things. One, exactly what you said. You were the one who was like, you need to be making sure you're eating fat and protein whenever you do have something high.
And enough.
And the difference in my blood sugar when I took that advice and didn't was crazy. You also talked about going for a walk after you ate. The way that it regulated my blood sugar was crazy. And then the other really interesting thing was I looked and felt amazing. Like I look back at pictures.
It's crazy, right? But why don't they teach this?
I know they should teach it in school. And also what was sort of illuminating about it and what I'm getting to here is, now granted, everybody's diabetes look different and some people have to have medication and mine was very easily controlled. But it was amazing how it was not as restrictive as I thought and just like how much better I felt eating sensibly. And I think sometimes you need that pressure. You need some kind of pressure to force you to change and kind of rip off the Band-Aid.
Right. And I also just wanted to say on that, Catherine, like, as individuals, we're like, oh, what did I do to cause this? What decisions did I make? The reality is, like, for many people, it may not even be related to the food, right? Like gestational diabetes is very hormone related. It's like this one period of time. And for individuals with family histories of diabetes, right? Or they just have a predisposition or another condition that predisposes them to it. I think taking a little bit of like oh my gosh, what did I do wrong to get here? And turning it into like, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to empower and educate myself is huge. And so I think that's what you did, right? You learned a lot from that. And that's like the real heart of it.
Yeah.
Just a little side bit.
Thank you. Thank you. I did learn a little bit from it. Okay. Well, I was not expecting when we came on here for you to dive right into the ADHD part. And I'm so glad. You just are I think of all of the work that you do. And we hadn't really had a conversation about that. If there's anything you're comfortable sharing or patterns you've seen with patients or clients with ADHD and how you've helped them tackle that, I mean, I would love to hear, and I know listeners would too.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so wonderful because I've kind of been able to see it over the age and over the lifespan, right? Because I do some of my work in pediatrics at the hospital, but then I also see many adult patients in private practice. And we do see some pediatrics. My colleague sees them as well, but usually for different reasons. So the things that I notice in the population is that I find that breakfast is really hard. And especially for those that take medication, it's like 10 times harder, right? Because so many of the medications that people take for ADHD that help them so much also really kill their hunger cues. So one thing that I have my patients with ADHD do at first thing in the morning is have something to eat before they even take their medication, if that's possible. Really try to, or even if you don't take medication, really try to make that breakfast a priority. And breakfast, ideally, we want to be some combination of fiber and protein. So we were talking about that. So what does that look like? So Many of my clients, especially those with ADHD, like something quick and easy that they can grab. So shakes, whether homemade or there's some different brands of shakes I really like Iconic or Koi or Own. You can see some of them in the grocery store. But then also making sure that they're getting something really high fiber with that. So whether it's fruits, different types of high fiber breads or grains, and some source of fat. Fat is really, really good for our brains. It promotes fullness, but it also has a lot of benefits in terms of kind of pathways and attention and focus in our brains. So, with that high fiber bread or grain, could you have something like a nut butter on top of it? It's making that breakfast a huge priority first thing in the morning. I think you kind of alluded to it before, but sugar's effect on the brain, especially in individuals with ADHD, you don't want to set yourself up for kind of that roller coaster that I was talking about. And the best way to do that is to aim to eat every 4 to 5 hours. I think that's also hard, especially for those that take medication because they just don't feel hungry. So I encourage people to focus on smaller volume type items so it doesn't look and feel so overwhelming to them when they know they have to eat. So whether that's like a soup or a type of drink, something that's going to hit their needs, but also not totally turn their stomach when they know that they've got to eat.
It's so interesting because I was off medication for a really long time. I actually went back on a low dose of Ritalin about a year ago. And maybe it's because I'm on a lower dose, but it actually in some ways makes it easier to kind of focus on nutrition for the lunchtime hours because it does sort of dampen my hunger a little bit. And so I am instead thinking like, okay, I really do I need this for function as much as flavor. And so as much as I will never be a person and do not wish to be a person who just, eats to live, it's been a little bit of a reframe. But I do agree that you have to be so mindful about it because what can happen is you're not hungry, and then you're ravenous. And so you skip that meal and you're eating crap, or you're going to hyper focus because you're working. And I really have to focus on reminding myself I need to eat lunch. And I try to keep high protein options. Like sardines have been a lifesaver for me. Sardines on toast with
such
tomato.
a good source of omega-3s. Yep.
Some tuna, like for whatever reason, I know tinned fish is not for everybody, but having like an easy grab and go option or, even lunch meats with like a salad or a wrap.
I want to go back to something you said though, about by the time you get to that meal, you're ravenous. So there's data to say that when your blood sugar drops, the first thing that your brain wants is carbohydrates. Like there's a protective mechanism in your brain that says your blood sugar is low. We need to get the chips, the breads, anything that's going to bring your blood sugar up because all your body's concerned about is your safety, right? And how to keep you alive. So I always tell my clients, it's not putting yourself in a position to get to that point. Like I would rather you have a snack between breakfast and lunch or not exceed that 4 hours than go into a meal starving. Because when you go into a meal starving, especially if even in the evening when meds wear off, right? That's another huge time. If you go into those meals starving, it's so hard to make a good decision. You just want to eat. You just want to feel better.
Okay, Skylar. So obviously we're talking about busy brains, but you and I are both women, 40, approaching 40. I know a lot of people listening fall into that elder millennial.
Yes.
I cannot deal with the protein. I need you to talk to me about this because I understand we need more protein. I anecdotally know I feel so much better when I eat protein, but I don't think we need to force feed ourselves a gajillion grams of protein or we're going to turn to dust. Like, can you speak some truth? What do we really talk? Give me some real talk here. It's just out of control.
Well, it's just so interesting too, because yes, I'm going to be 40 next month, and I have a real interest in like the menopause population too. As we get into 40 and we get into that perimenopause timeframe, and for everyone, it's different. But one of the biggest trends I've seen is protein. And while I think it's good to be aware of protein intake, I think there needs to be a balance. I think a lot of what you're seeing on kind of pushing protein has to do with the fact that the dietary recommendations for protein haven't been revised. Don't quote me, but I think since 1989. So it's been a long time since those recommendations were changed. And when we use calculations that are recommended to calculate protein, it's a much lower amount than realistically I think people should aim for. with that being said, I think that if you exceed protein or listen to kind of some of the more extreme recommendations, you could also be doing harm, right? Because protein's tough on your kidneys. You eat too much protein, you include too many protein powders. I was just talking about this with a physician the other day with a high school athlete. You can affect your kidney function. So you need to find a balance kind of in the amount of protein that's right for you. So when I think about general protein recommendations, we know that if you can include some sources of plant-based proteins, so things like beans, tofu, tempeh, seitan, lentils, chickpeas, we know that that's easier and better on the body. We know that exorbitant amounts of red meat are not great. Again, kind of striking the balance. I tell my clients, if you want to have red meat twice a week, go for it, but maybe not every night, right? A variety of protein to me is more important than the absolute number. So thinking about eggs, for example, eggs are an excellent source of protein. They're an excellent source of choline. They're great for your brain. But do we need to get like 200 grams of protein a day? God, no. I mean, it would have a negative effect on your body. And also, eating protein in excess does not equal more muscle. It means that it takes what it needs and the rest just gets stored, right? So we want to also remember that more doesn't always equal better. It's the quality of the protein and it's the amount that's right for you, which may be a little bit above the dietary recommendations, but it's based on your activity level. And, working with a dietitian, you can quickly kind of identify what that number is.
I want to talk about overwhelm a little bit because we are all getting inundated with the algorithm and there's just so much information out there. Right now, I think a lot of women our age are being like pushed that protein narrative that we're talking about. How do we, besides obviously following you, Skylar, and what is your Instagram?
Oh, it's Newberry Street Nutrition and our newsletter. You should sign up for our newsletter. I don't know if you get it. We just had a patient say, she's actually not a patient, one of our people that gets our newsletter, that she lost weight and improved her diet just by reading the newsletter. The newsletter has a ton of great free information in it. So you can sign up for that on our site. But we do have a social media page. We don't share as much on there as we do in the newsletter.
We love a newsletter. How do we normally say this at the end, but we're going to say it right now because I want to talk about it. Where is your newsletter? How do we sign up?
Our website's newberrystreetnutrition.com and you can sign up for our newsletter right there. When you do, you actually get like these 5 free hacks for heart health and so you can sign on right there. But we do a lot of collaborations with what we should actually do one soon, Catherine, with other professionals. We'll do them with physical therapists, chefs, physicians, covering a range of topics. Menopause was one that we did recently with an OBGYN and a PT. And you can find out and they're all free events. And you can just find out about that when you sign up for our newsletter.
Awesome. So besides signing up for your newsletter, which we're all going to do, what advice do you give to people who are just feeling overwhelmed by all the information from social media? And like, how do we find the right information and filter that?
I mean, I think it's important for people to know that I feel overwhelmed by the amount of information, right? And I give people the analogy of like, when I became a mom and I was listening to all these parenting. There's so many parenting, parent this way, parent that way. Nutrition's no different, if you think about it, right? There's eat this way, eat that way, eat this way in perimenopause, eat that way when you're training for a marathon. And nothing is individualized on social media. It's all kind of these blanket recommendations. So by the time most people get to me, they're thoroughly overwhelmed. And I think one of the best things that they can do is actually shy away from kind of these blanket recommendations that aren't personalized. And so I think bringing it back to kind of yourself, thinking about maybe 2 or 3 things that you can do. And for my clients, I see them every 2 weeks. So over the period of, a week or 2 that can improve your diet. So for you, if it is trying to get in a little bit more protein, maybe you're thinking about, okay, I want to get in 100 grams of protein a day. Like, how am I going to do that? Maybe it's looking at your meals that day and saying, okay, maybe it's logging your meals and saying, okay, 30 grams at breakfast, 30 grams at lunch, 30 grams at dinner. Maybe it's experimenting with different types of proteins. But I think I would really like it if all of us, could move away from kind of these blanket recommendations that are built on the extremes in social media and really take the time to focus on us. What do we need? What is going to work best for us? Because it's so different for every individual and life stage that they're in.
I agree with you. And it's so difficult. I understand like we are we feel this pressure in so many parts of our life, right? Like I want to cook the perfect weeknight meal and we get served a gajillion recipes, or I want to increase my protein when you get a gajillion. I had a example recently, I have rosacea and I was trying to figure that out. And of course I couldn't see my derm for a while. And I tried all these things from the internet and like it made it so much worse. And it's always this balance of prioritizing time and resources and money, but making sure that it makes sense for you individually. And that's where I think like the AI and the internet can be really dangerous, because we really are real humans, and having the human element of like a real trained professional give us advice is so helpful.
And I think also just having your awareness up with so many of these sites, like at the end of the day, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to get you to, buy their supplements? Like I had a patient recently do this whole GI analysis, and told her all the foods she should and shouldn't have and should include. And at the end of it, it said, and buy our supplements and it'll make it all better. And it's like, are we creating problems so that we can sell solutions? I mean, that's an issue to me, right? And so I think that's where I get very leery of social media, because 99% of the time they're trying to sell you something and they don't even know you. And so that's why, we can't lose sight of the human connection and kind of working with someone directly that knows about you and your needs.
Amen to that. And I love the idea of spending money on an expert with education and experience and care, rather than throwing money at supplements and products, because I can't tell you in how many facets of lifestyle I've seen people say like, oh, I can't afford a personal trainer. I can't afford a dietitian. I can't afford these things. But then they will spend so much money on these untested products that they're being fed through social media.
Right. Because people want fast results, right? People want fast results. And I think that, there are dietitians that take your insurance. There are dietitians that, have sliding scale payment plans. Like there are ways to make it work. And so I think that just thinking about the long term as opposed to just the immediate right now, you're looking for long-term solutions.
When would you recommend someone see a dietitian? Like, who is a dietitian for?
Yeah, it's so funny because I think everybody should see a dietitian. It's kind of like a therapist at some point in your life. Like, I think, we all kind of get into these situations where we're like, oh, I actually don't know what to do. I do feel overwhelmed by this. And so I always joke with my colleagues and my friends. I'm like, why don't we have more nutrition and health class? Something that just came out recently is, and I won't share my political views, but you may infer them based on what I'm about to say. One of RFK's new, Make America Healthy Again, which I have many thoughts about. One of the only positives I've seen of that campaign is that he is encouraging physicians to get more training in nutrition. And people might immediately say like, oh, that's not good. What about the dietitians? But at the end of the day, like, it's just going to extend the reach that people get of getting some kind of nutrition education, right? Because everybody should get nutrition education. And so if you can get a couple minutes from your doctor, that's better than getting none at all, in my opinion, because we have such an under-education of nutrition in this country. It's not part of our curriculum when we're in health class at school. They might spend an hour on it, but we do it 3 times a day, and people are so unaware of how to do it. And so I think that, if we can look at nutrition as a basic life skill instead of something that is a luxury, that becomes a little bit more tangible too.
I would love to hear your take on people's current obsession with seed oils.
It's just the trend of the moment. What happens with so many of these things is there's a little bit of truth and a lot of hype, right? So let's go back to the gluten-free movement for a second, right? You think about that. So the gluten-free movement, gluten-free diets are designed for people with celiac. Celiac is 1% of the population. There was this huge boom around gluten-free eating that people really, really latched to. And they probably latched to it too because it was lower in carbohydrates. It probably made them feel better, right? To eat less gluten. I find that the seed oils kind of follow a similar trend. So the underneath of the seed oils, in my opinion, is people should eat less processed real food, right? We all should. That's the goal. How doable and sustainable that is in the day-to-day, that's another thing. And so I think when people talk about, not eating foods that have seed oils in them, and seed oils being inflammatory, the underlying message is that we should eat less processed food. the reality is we live in a society, and especially a state, that is incredibly expensive. People are running around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And oftentimes a lot of the convenience type foods have seed oils in them. I would much rather see people focus on eating more real food than hyper fixating on seed oils. Cause I don't think it's helpful, and I don't think it's going to result in any real positive change. I think it's just going to make people crazy.
And now you're seeing packaged food companies latch onto this. And so there's...
It's like the GLP-1 foods. It's like the Ozempic and Wegovy foods, right?
They changed the formulation to just not have seed oils, which really bothers me because then you are like perpetuating this myth that it's the seed oil itself that is poisoning you. And I don't know how comfortable you are talking about the actual seed oil situation, but from my understanding, first of all, seed oils are not poisonous. And obviously there are some that can be processed in a certain way that may be more or less healthy for you. But can you talk a little bit about the actual spook that people have about ingesting seed oils?
Yeah. So I think just an overarching thing about oils is we know, like, the most well-studied data around oils is the Predimed study and olive oil, right? We know that olive oil is the healthiest oil. It's good for our hearts. It promotes fullness. It's part of that kind of Mediterranean diet that you often hear people talk about. But at a certain temperature, we probably don't want to be like having our olive oil smoke, right? If it gets to that point, we want to use a higher heat oil. And so for a lot of my patients, I recommend avocado oil or sprays. But I would never say like, don't use some of the, like, sunflower oil or some of these more seed-based oils, because I think we need to understand, like, are we worried that they're inflammatory? It seems like that's kind of one of the concerns I'm hearing from a lot of people. How are you using them? What are you cooking when you make them? What kind of mixed dishes are you, adding them into? That to me is a lot more important. So I think the fear around seed oil, from what I understand, I don't spend a ton of time on it, but stems from inflammation, but is kind of part of this overarching message around like eating less processed foods, which is probably a good thing, but not if you're replacing the seed oil in the processed food for something that's even worse. And I think I kind of said it before, but I think you're also seeing that we see a lot of patients on GLP-1. So Mounjaro, Ozempic, Wegovy. Now the food companies are trying to market foods to those patients that taste better to them on the medication, because that's how they're going to sell, because so many people are taking those drugs. So you have to kind of remember that so much of it comes down to the bottom line and money, and some of those recommendations are coming from there too.
So I want to go back to the fact that it's the new year, and like kind of the reason I thought now is the right time to have you on for the first time. I'm hoping that we can chat a lot in the future, because I know that these things are going to keep coming up. But I wanted to have you on now because so many people are thinking about New Year's resolutions. They are thinking about revamping their diet. And when I think about busy brain folks, overwhelm and prioritization are huge. I think everybody gets overwhelmed with New Year's resolutions. I think it's especially hard if you're dealing with any sort of executive functioning situation. So, you've been at this for a long time. Can you talk about some of the common mistakes that you see people making around the new year when they're coming in hot with their resolutions?
Dry January makes my skin crawl.
Say more.
Say more. It's so funny because I find that the most successful people are black and white thinkers, right? So it's like, I am going to go from drinking a ton in November, December through the holidays to not drinking at all. And the danger with that is like, the second it's February 1st, the wheels come off and it's the extremes. And so I think when people think about New Year's resolutions, I would really shy away from the extremes. And dry January is just an example of that, right? Instead of saying, I'm not going to drink any alcohol, maybe you say, I'm only going to drink alcohol on the weekends. Or like my personal rule is like, I'm only going to drink alcohol on the weekends, or if I'm going out to dinner with a friend and we order a drink. Like that's something that I just try to do because I think it's probably better for my health in general. But finding that gray as opposed to the extremes, kind of identifying one thing really specifically that you can focus on, but not making it an all or nothing type approach.
So this is the part of the podcast, Skylar, which I call the busy brain part. And we talk about two things. It has to do with cooking. So get your cooking dinner for your family hat on. I always like to ask people what sparks creativity for them in the kitchen and then what calms the chaos. So it's a two-part question, and the chaos can be mental or physical. But I am curious, what sparks creativity for you when it's time to get in the kitchen?
Right now, at this stage in my life, it's trying to figure out a way to get my kids to eat anything that has any nutritional value. So what sparks creativity for me there is figuring out ways to get vegetables into them. And that's something I've really been trying. So for example, my daughter won't eat, vegetables if you put them in front of her, but she loves to eat the mushrooms from the olive bar, like at the grocery store, or she'll eat, I know it's so funny, or like olives from these packets that you can get at Costco. So it sparks creativity in me to kind of get a sense of like where she's at, what she will eat, what is appealing to her. And what calms the chaos for me is knowing that like one single meal is not going to dictate anyone's overall health, that some nights it's just going to be a total shit show and we're going to order and it is what it is. And some nights we're going to have this beautiful meal. And as long as we're sitting together and, kind of spending that time together, that's huge. Again, it's moving away from that black and white type thinking. And so calming the chaos for me is just saying to myself, okay, it's all right. Like if on a Thursday I'm exhausted and we're just going to order pizza, like that's okay. Because on Monday or on Tuesday or whatever, we had this beautiful nutrient dense meal. And so that also teaches them balance and moves away from the extremes. But that's kind of what calms the chaos for me, is giving myself permission to say, okay, it's all right if every meal is not this elegant, beautiful creation.
It's a process. And I feel like the entire theme of this chat was like avoiding the extremes.
Yeah.
Avoiding the extremes.
Yeah.
Stay
Please.
the course. Oh my gosh. Skylar, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. There's a million more things I want to talk to you about, and we're definitely going to have you back if you can make the time. I really appreciate it. I know you have so much going on.
I would love that.
Say one more time where we can find you and all things Newbury Street Nutrition.
Yeah. So Newbury Street Nutrition's our practice. You can find us at newburystreetnutrition.com, on Instagram at Newbury Street Nutrition. You can feel free to email me, Skylar at Newbury Street Nutrition. We see all different types of patients, from pediatrics to heart health, and we're here for any of your questions. And feel free to sign up for our newsletter on the website. It's got some good resources too. But thank you so much for having me.
This was a blast. And next, we're going to go enjoy a meal together and a glass of wine.
I would love that. Please. I need it.
Thank you, Skylar. And you. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Skylar. I hope it was helpful as we all head into the new year thinking about how to keep our food life delicious and nourishing and supportive of our big ambitions and our busy brains. We want to be feeding them well. But before we go, I need to ask you for one thing that would mean so much to me in the show. Please go to my website, katherinesmart.com, to keep in touch, subscribe to my newsletter, and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a busy brain friend. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.
This could happen to